What if I told you that the secret to true power isn't caring more but caring less? Not about everything, but about all the wrong things that keep you trapped in mental prison. Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century philosopher who declared God is dead, discovered something revolutionary about human nature. He found that most people live their entire lives as prisoners, not behind bars, but behind the invisible chains of other people's opinions, society's expectations, and the desperate need for validation. But there's a way out, and it starts with a radical shift in what you choose to care about. I'm going to share Nietzsche's most powerful insight: how to free your mind by strategically not caring. This isn't about becoming a sociopath or checking out of life entirely. It's about understanding the difference between the herd mentality that keeps you weak and the Übermensch mentality that makes you unstoppable. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your need for approval is your biggest enemy, how to identify when you're living by someone else's rules, and the exact mindset shift that can transform you from a follower into what Nietzsche called the Overman. Let's start with a brutal truth about modern life. We live in the age of performative existence. Picture this. You post something on social media. Within seconds, you're checking for likes, comments, shares. Your mood literally depends on numbers on a screen created by strangers you'll probably never meet. You refresh the page obsessively, watching those metrics like a stock trader watching market fluctuations. Your self-worth rises and falls with digital approval from people whose opinions shouldn't matter to you at all. Nietzsche saw this coming 150 years ago. He called it herd mentality, the tendency for humans to think, act, and value themselves based on the group's approval. He observed that most people are like sheep, following the crowd without questioning where they're being led or why they're following. The herd mentality isn't just about social media. It shows up everywhere in modern life. Choosing a career because it looks impressive to others rather than because it fulfills you. Staying in relationships because breaking up would disappoint family members who aren't living your life. Buying things you can't afford to maintain an image that exhausts you financially and emotionally. Avoiding risks because failure would be embarrassing, even when those risks could lead to extraordinary growth. Working jobs that drain your soul because society tells you they're respectable. Living in places you hate because that's where successful people are supposed to live. Pursuing goals that don't align with your values because they align with other people's expectations of what your life should look like. Nietzsche argued that most people never become who they truly are because they're too busy being who others expect them to be. They live what he called second-hand lives, constantly measuring themselves against external standards they never consciously chose. They inherit their values like they inherit eye color, never questioning whether these inherited beliefs actually serve them. The result? A life of quiet desperation where you're always performing for an audience that doesn't even care about your well-being. You become an actor in a play you didn't write, speaking lines you didn't choose, trying to win applause from people who are too busy performing their own roles to pay genuine attention to yours. But here's the twist that makes this whole system even more absurd. The audience you're performing for? They're performing too. Everyone's so busy seeking approval that no one's actually giving genuine attention. It's a massive collective delusion where everyone is both performer and distracted audience member. Think about the last time you were genuinely impressed by someone trying to impress you versus someone who was simply being themselves. So what's the solution? Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, literally the Overman or Superman. This isn't about physical strength or dominating others. It's not about becoming a narcissist or sociopath who tramples on others. It's about becoming someone who creates their own values instead of inheriting them from society. The Übermensch doesn't ask what others think is good or bad, right or wrong, successful or unsuccessful. They decide for themselves based on their own experience, wisdom, and judgment. They become their own moral authority instead of outsourcing that authority to parents, peers, politicians, or social media influencers. This concept terrified Nietzsche's contemporaries, and it terrifies people today because it requires taking full responsibility for your life. It's much easier to follow rules someone else made than to create your own ethical framework. It's more comfortable to blame society for your problems than to take ownership of your choices. But here's what Nietzsche understood that most people miss. External validation is an addiction that can never be satisfied. No amount of likes, followers, promotions, or praise will ever fill the void created by not knowing who you are or what you actually want from life. Think about the most powerful people you know, not just wealthy or famous, but truly powerful. They share one common trait. They seem immune to criticism and praise alike. They're not trying to impress anyone because they've developed what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, acceptance of their own path regardless of others' opinions. This is where not caring becomes your superpower. When you stop caring about external validation, several transformative things happen immediately. First, you become authentic. You can't be authentic while constantly calculating how others will react to your choices. Authenticity requires the courage to disappoint people, to be misunderstood, to stand alone if necessary. Second, you become fearless. Most fears aren't about physical danger, but social danger. Fear of rejection, embarrassment, judgment, or exclusion. When you stop caring what others think, most of your fears evaporate because you realize that other people's opinions can't actually hurt you unless you give them that power. Third, you become creative. Creativity requires risk-taking, experimentation, and the willingness to fail publicly. But you can't take creative risks if you're terrified of looking foolish or being criticized. Not caring about others' opinions unleashes your creative potential. Fourth, you become decisive. Indecision often comes from trying to predict others' reactions and please everyone simultaneously. When you stop caring about universal approval, decision-making becomes much simpler because you only need to satisfy one person, yourself. Fifth, you become magnetic. There's something irresistibly attractive about people who are comfortable in their own skin. They're not performing or seeking validation. They're just being themselves fully and unapologetically. Let's get practical. How do you actually implement this philosophy? How do you stop caring without becoming a selfish monster who tramples on others? Start with social media detox. Nietzsche would have been horrified by Instagram and TikTok, platforms explicitly designed to turn you into a validation-seeking machine. Try this experiment. Post something genuine that you care about. Then don't check the response for 24 hours. Notice the withdrawal symptoms, the urge to check, the anxiety about how it's being received. That's your addiction to external validation revealing itself. Consider deleting social media apps from your phone for a week. Notice how often you reach for them without thinking. Pay attention to how your mood changes when you're not constantly comparing yourself to others or seeking digital approval. Next, practice saying no without elaborate justifications. Most people over-explain their boundaries because they're desperate for others to approve of their choices. The Übermensch says no clearly and kindly, then moves on without seeking permission to have boundaries. Then experiment with being misunderstood. Share an unpopular opinion you genuinely hold. Wear something you like that others might find weird. Take a path others wouldn't choose. Each time you survive being different, you build immunity to social pressure. Most importantly, develop your own value system. Instead of inheriting your parents' dreams, society's definitions of success, or your peer group's priorities, ask yourself some fundamental questions. What actually matters to me? What kind of person do I want to become? What would I do if no one was watching or judging? What brings me genuine satisfaction rather than just social approval? Write down your answers. Most people have never consciously examined their values. They just absorb them from their environment like cultural osmosis. Creating your own value system is like creating your own GPS for life decisions. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are, not discovering some predetermined self that was always there, but actively creating yourself through conscious choices that reflect your authentic preferences rather than others' expectations. But here's a beautiful paradox. When you stop desperately seeking others' approval, you often become more attractive to others. People are drawn to those who seem comfortable in their own skin, who aren't constantly performing or seeking validation. This isn't because you've become manipulative or calculating. It's because authenticity is rare and magnetic. Most people spend so much energy pretending to be what they think others want that they've forgotten how to be themselves. The Übermensch doesn't hate the herd or try to destroy society. They simply refuse to be enslaved by it. They participate in social life on their own terms rather than society's terms. They contribute value without seeking constant validation for their contributions. Think of artists like David Bowie or Frida Kahlo, entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey, thinkers like Einstein or Maya Angelou. They didn't become influential by following the crowd, but by having the courage to be themselves completely, regardless of others' opinions. This is Nietzsche's secret to power. True power comes from internal sovereignty, the ability to govern yourself according to your own values, rather than being governed by others' expectations. When you free your mind by not caring about the wrong things, you create space to care deeply about the right things. Your relationships become deeper because they're based on authenticity rather than performance. Your work becomes more meaningful because it reflects your values rather than others' expectations. The path isn't easy. Society will resist your independence. People will try to pull you back into the herd through guilt, shame, or manipulation. But each time you choose authenticity over approval, you become stronger and freer. So here's your challenge. Identify one area where you've been living for others' approval rather than your own satisfaction. Make one choice this week that reflects who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. Remember, you weren't born to be a carbon copy of everyone else's expectations. You were born to become the creator of your own values, the author of your own story. What's one thing you're going to stop caring about this week? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more philosophical insights that can change your life.